Rev up your engines!
Here's an interesting one. Ford has now patented four-wheel steering on their F-150 trucks. Now, they're not saying if they're going to actually use it or when they're going to use it, but they have patented a design now that has four-wheel steering. It allows inside and outside wheels to steer under different geometry. And of course, yeah, they would steer fantastic. There have been a lot of four-wheel steering systems out there. The problem is they had a cost to the vehicle that you really wonder, is it something that people want to spend that kind of money for and also have to deal with it when it breaks? Because almost all the four-wheel steering systems that I've seen and had to work on, they broke down when they got a little bit older, and they cost a small fortune to repair when they did break down. The steering assembly for the back is going to be inside the springs on the back, because that's for the rear-wheel drive one. You always have front steering, but this is going to add back steering. And then it's going to have computers that are controlling all the whole systems, because it gets very complicated. Like I said, this is something that has been tried in the past. As far as I'm concerned, it's pretty much a massive failure. So we don't know if they're actually going to build them like that, but Ford does have a patent on it now for their F-150s. I guess they're afraid Chevy's going to steal it from them, so they patented it. 30 says, why doesn't Toyota bring a full-size diesel to America? It'd be a whole lot better than the big three. Here's the reason. As far as I can figure, you know, Toyota sold diesel vehicles all over the world. I got a friend in Australia who's got a Toyota pickup with a diesel. He's got like 350,000 miles and is still running strong. They have done it all over the world. But diesels were never that popular in the United States, and now they'll probably never really bring anything in, because diesels, not only is their popularity dwindling, but the governments are against them because they pollute so much. Like in Europe, they say they're going to illegal consumers driving around in diesel-powered vehicles because of the pollution they put out. So I doubt that Toyota's ever going to start putting them into vehicles they sell in the United States. Big, giant 18-wheelers, hey, you know, they always have different laws for them, and it'll probably be a long time before they make them illegal for businesses and stuff to run. The popularity of diesels is declining, and it was kind of small to begin with the United States. I don't see Toyota's ever doing something like that. For people who wanted a diesel, yeah, it would be a great diesel, but I think they'd look at the market and say, no, we're going in a different direction, and I don't think they'll ever bring one here. Toby667 says, hey, I want to know what's wrong with my Volvo XC70 2001. It stays at a low RPM unless I hit the gas. It misfires and stalls. I change the spark plugs and the coils, and the vacuum lines are fine. It's an old Volvo. That's not surprising. You know, 19 years old, and those XC70s, they often turn into endless money pits. But you're saying it misfires at low RPMs. There's two main things you want to look at. One is the fuel injectors. If they're dirty or clogged or flat, worn out, they have to be perfect when it's idling or it'll start misfiring. That's where one thing is kind of confusing for a lot of people. They see misfire, they immediately think, misfire, it's not firing. Something's wrong with the ignition system. Yeah, it can be the ignition system, but if the fuel system's wrong, it won't fire correctly. If a head gasket's starting to blow, it won't fire correctly in that cylinder if it's blowing for that particular cylinder. The head gaskets can blow in just one cylinder or two. They don't all blow at once. So there's a lot of things that can make a misfire. But if it is misfiring, you feel it stumbling, get it scanned, because there's going to be a lot of information from a scan. Live data, mode 6 data. We mechanics know what to look at. The fancy ones that we have, we can get everything from which cylinders are misfiring, how many times, how the fuel injection systems, how the injectors are firing, how many milliseconds. We can break it down to a lot of stuff. So start there. Don't just start guessing wildly. Start there. You did the obvious, coils, spark plugs, but it's still doing it. So you want to get that data. It could easily, I know the Volvos, it could be easily be you got a bad fuel injector or a head gasket that's starting to blow on one of the cylinders. And then you would get misfires for that cylinder, and that data would show it. Rimcheck says, Scotty, thanks for all your wisdom. I just took my 2011 Honda Accord with 80,000 miles for an emissions inspection in Connecticut. Now all the lights on the instrument cluster are on and the gauges read 0. Help. Let's hope they didn't do what they might have done. Inspection stations are inspecting a lot of cars, right? So the equipment they use, the plug that plugs into your OBD port under the dash, if they're in a hurry, they could easily put it on cockeyed, bent pins, shorted pins out, and they could have shorted out your main computer. Your ECM, the electronic control module. They could have shorted it out. Now, if this thing happened, immediately you picked it up and all those lights were on, take it back because they did something wrong. Now, if it didn't happen immediately, sometimes something as dumb as a corroded wire on your battery can do that. Have your battery load tested and your alternator load tested. Places like AutoZone do that free, and you can see it could be that your battery finally went out or your alternator isn't charging right, and it can do stuff like that. If it happened as soon as you picked it up and drove down the street and all that stuff was on, I'm thinking they quickly plugged their port in, got it on cockeyed, bent some wires, and if the power and ground wires touch, easily could have shorted out your main computer, some of the circuits in it. That's why I'm death against these inspection things myself. It's a scam to the public to make money for the states. They get the majority of the money for those inspections. The money goes to the state itself. It's just another tax. And as it comes lately, a lot of states are dropping these. I think there's only like 15 or 16 left that actually do it anymore because people are getting mad and the consumers are telling the politicians, we're tired of being ripped off. And a lot of them have to listen because they get elected, especially during election years. And a lot of states have dumped these things. And I think it's a good thing to dump it because I've seen problems created. And on the other hand, I've seen even worse things. I've seen where people paid $1,000 or more in repairs that the vehicle didn't even need. And in some cases, they didn't even do the repairs that they said they did. They just made it up and charged them for stuff that later, when I'm working on the car, I'll say, well, you need this, this, and this. And I say, well, we paid these guys to do that. And I'll show them, I'll say, look, this thing's got 80,000 miles of wear on these spark plugs. They didn't change your spark plugs. They just BS'd you. So I'm against those things myself. Hammy Ham says, hey, Scotty, my car's heater only heats up when I'm going on the highway, consistently higher RPMs. When the engine idles, it's not putting hot air out anymore. Help. There's really only two things that can do that. One is, pray you're just low on coolant. Because if you're low on coolant, the heater core that makes the heat is usually among the highest thing in your car's cooling system. It's in the dash and it's up higher than the radiator. So if you get air in the system because you're low on coolant, then that heater core will have air in it instead of hot water. And as nutty as it sounds, a heater won't work with hot air. It only works with hot water. It's because the specific heat of hot water, if you want to get into the physics, is much higher than hot air. So hot air won't do much. And then when you're going down a highway, the water pump is pumping so hard that it finally pumps some water through the system and you get heat. Now the other thing is, say you check your coolant and it is full all the way to the top. Well, you got to have a clogged heater core. You're driving slow, it's just sitting there and the pump isn't pumping much pressure and you don't get much heat because there's not enough hot water flowing through because your heater core is clogged up and only a little bit gets through it. But when you're at highway speeds, the water pump's pumping like mad, putting out more pressure, and it can push more hot water through a heater core that's partially clogged up. So that's often what it is. If it's full of coolant, odds are you got a clogged heater core. I got a video on how to flush your heater core. You can take the hoses off, flush it with a garden hose one way, then back flush it the other way and do that a bunch of times till all the crud comes out, and you might get lucky. Try that if it's full of coolant. Because replacing the heater core in a modern car, often it can be well over $1,000, $1,500 because of the designs. Monix13 says, I got an '08 Saturn Vue XE that needs a passenger side axle replaced. I'm having trouble finding a good place to purchase. Go locally. You're always better going locally. Last time I fixed one of those, I bought it on AutoZone. I think it cost me $70. It worked perfectly fine. I have bought hundreds of drive axles from AutoZone, and every single one of them I bought worked, and so far, fingers crossed, I never had one come back years later and I had to do it over. So they're selling decent stuff. Yeah, it's made in China, but there's good companies in China and bad companies. AutoZone is so big that if they get crappy parts, well, they're going to change the people that they buy it from because they've got computer geeks who work for the company and they say, hey, we got too many returns on this, let's buy it from a different company. So just go to a place like AutoZone and buy them. This is another reason I don't advise to buy stuff online, because you buy something online, it's like an axle, you take it all apart, it doesn't work, your car's all taken apart, you got to send it back and wait. Buy local. That's my whole thing. Find a good place that sells good parts locally and buy it locally, and then if you got a problem you can take it back locally and you're not stuck waiting days or weeks for it to be shipped back and forth and then they send the wrong one. Locally is the way to go on that stuff because there's so many big stores around nowadays. You can always find ones that have it. That's just a GM product. All those places sell those. It's not that hard. Jim Halpert says, Scotty, what do you think of Grumman LLV mail trucks? They always sound like they're leaking exhaust. Yeah, that's because they often are. Those are just crazy little things that, you know, they had them for years because they were cheap. I guess, you know, they wanted to buy American. I notice now they're not using any of them here in Houston. They're buying Chrysler products here that they're using now. They gave up with that company. I mean, there were little bitty things for tooling around, fine for inner city driving here and there and not having to go fast. I know a few people that bought them secondhand when the post office was done with them, but they were really falling apart pieces of junk then because the post office didn't take such great care of them, and then they bought them and the post office didn't even want them anymore. So not that smart of an idea to buy a used one unless you want a lifetime project of something you can toy around with, and I don't know, maybe your grandfather was a mailman, you've got fond memories of him or something. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.